Northumbria Police Constable dismissed after misconduct hearing over unwanted touching of a female. COVID is so serious that the National Police Chief Council have said that they won't be enforcing quarantine rules if they knock twice and don't get an answer. Surprise, surprise, crime rates rise after national lockdown, destroying the police's pretense that crime rates fell because of their hard work. 5 men jailed on the Isle of Man for shopping after arriving on the island. And an inquest finds that a Greek homeless man died outside an Uxbridge police station whilst police watched a DVD, failing in their duty of care. This and more coming up. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, these reports are, where possible, daily Monday to Friday, although it's Saturday today. Please remember to subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss any future uploads. And if you do appreciate the work I do, please consider joining the channel Patreon for as little as just £3 a month, which will help me continue providing this content. Hello, ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, innies, outies and in-betweeners. My name's Dan and welcome back to another PAP Reports. Today is Saturday, the 3rd of October 2020. On the 28th of September, we briefly mentioned PC Grant Parker from Northumbria Police. I say briefly because there was literally no information other than he was accused of unwanted touching towards a woman on a night out. Makes a change to see some unwanted touching whilst not on duty. He met a woman for 3 hours at a coffee shop even though he was on duty and in full uniform, and was also accused of showing confidential police material to a woman at her home. The hearing started on the 21st and was to last 5 days, with the results published in due course. Well, the conclusion of Grant's misconduct hearing has been released this week. Superintendent Steve Amari, Head of Professional Standards at Northumbria Police, said, "We expect officers and staff to maintain the highest standards at all times, and if anyone is found to have fallen below these, we are committed to taking appropriate action." On Friday, the panel of an independently chaired misconduct hearing concluded Grant Parker had breached the standards of professional behaviour and that it amounted to gross misconduct. The panel determined he should be dismissed without notice. "We want to make it extremely clear that his behaviour was completely unacceptable. In doing so, we want to reassure the public that the actions of this individual are in no way representative of the officers and staff who every single day display the highest level of professionalism and commitment to the communities we are proud to serve." Well, I've got to say, it's nice to see Plod being held to account, but it's still a massive shame, however, that the most serious of offences seem to be somewhat overlooked. Bedfordshire Police Constable PC Marwaha has been convicted of common assault, which occurred against a 15-year-old on the 10th of October 2019 in Luton during an arrest over suspicion of drugs offences. Although Marwaha continually denied the charges, a judge at Huntingdon Magistrates Court found him guilty at his trial, and then he was sentenced last week at Peterborough Magistrates Court, where he was handed an 8-week prison sentence, suspended for 12 months, ordered to undertake 20 days of rehabilitation. Rehabilitation for common assault. That's a new one. He was also ordered to pay £775 in costs, a victim surcharge of £122 and just £100 of compensation to his victim. Marwaha was suspended from duty during the process but was dismissed with immediate effect following a special case misconduct hearing held on the 1st of October. Assistant Chief Constable Shan Bajra said, "Our communities quite rightly expect us to act with integrity at all times, particularly in challenging and confrontational situations, which is why we have independent blah 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 blah. It is therefore of paramount importance that we treat those in our care in whatever form it takes with the utmost respect, blah 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 blah, same old shit." Clearly, PC Marwaha's actions went way beyond what is acceptable. This ruling shows that such behaviour will not be tolerated by the force. Usual spiel. An investigation by West Midlands Police under the supervision of the Independent Office of Police Conduct has been carried out over a member of West Midlands Police staff who was charged with allegedly supplying drugs. Cherelle Ying from Birmingham appeared at Birmingham Crown Court along with 2 co-defendants. The media has only mentioned one other defendant, by the way, and his appearance should have been yesterday, but after calling the court for the outcome of Ying's appearance, they tell me it's a multi-defendant case with 3 defendants. Although apart from Ying and 42-year-old Derek Dixon, the third defendant's name is still a mystery. The court adjourned the hearing until March 15th, 2021, and while Derek was remanded, I assume due to the fact he has no address, Ying has been bailed to reappear. A Dyfed Powys police constable who used police computers to research information about an ex-partner of his girlfriend has pleaded guilty to 9 charges of misusing police computers and the unauthorised use of personal data. 55-year-old Michael Westbury was a serving constable at the time of the offences, which took place between April and May last year, but has since retired. Well, got to keep that pension safe, isn't that right, boys? Appearing at Aberystwyth Justice Centre, Westbury was said to have frequently and repeatedly accessed the unauthorised information. Following an investigation by the Independent Office for Police Conduct, he was charged with 7 offences of accessing police computer systems without lawful purpose and 2 offences of unauthorised disclosure of information. Although the court heard his actions had not had any impact on police investigations and no information had been disclosed to criminals. Can't see how that makes any difference, to be honest. He still abused his position for his own gain. Sentencing Westbury, the judge took into account his guilty plea and, of course, an otherwise unblemished record during 24 years of service and handed him a 6-month jail sentence. Suspended for 2 years and ordered him to carry out 120 hours of unpaid work. The police have said over Stanley Johnson not wearing his face mask in a shop, as per government regulations, that they won't be dealing with COVID lawbreakers retrospectively, as in anything that's happened in the past and they hadn't dealt with at the time. I wonder what would happen to a country if the police behaved that way over all offences. Don't get me wrong, whatever my own views on face masks are, there can't be one rule for one and another for someone else, especially just because it happens to be the Prime Minister's dad. A spokesperson said, as a matter of course, the Metropolitan Police Service is not investigating COVID-related issues retrospectively. Where we become aware of a breach occurring, officers will seek to engage, explain and encourage people to follow the rules, only enforcing as a last resort, which is fine for those of us who might not understand the rules. But you would think that Stanley would have a pretty clear understanding of the rules, seeing as it's his son who delivered them to the entire country. Where alleged breaches are brought to our attention after the event, officers will not have had the opportunity to engage, explain or encourage, and those involved will not have had the chance to respond positively to that process, as most people do. Therefore, it would not be an appropriate or an effective use of resources in most circumstances to investigate or pursue enforcement. So let's see if this new way of dealing with people is expanded to other areas of the law. I'm sure that if somebody said something another person didn't like and called the police wouldn't have any issues wasting resources going out to find, arrest, warn and threaten them, even after the fact, when they miss the opportunity to speak to them about their conduct first. They said, we encourage everyone to make themselves aware of and to follow the new rules. The Prime Minister's official spokesperson said in relation to individuals, it's for police to determine what action to take. No doubt after Bojo had a quiet word with them. Quizzed about whether the PM had spoken to his dad, the Downing Street spokesperson said they did not know. The Prime Minister is clear the rules apply to everyone and everybody should follow them, he added. I think it is for the police to determine what action to take in relation to individuals. That applies to our justice system in general. Oh, is it now? So the justice system in general is determined by the police, is it? Pretty sure it was determined by the courts. Maybe that's where I've been going wrong. And it's not just Stanley Johnson who's got away with breaching the rules, as ex-Labour leader Jezza Corbyn is unlikely to face a fine for the same reason. And it's nice to see that equality under the law permeating throughout the justice system. And it does make me ask the question, though, as to why Margaret Ferrier, the SNP MP, is under investigation by 2 police forces for being a COVID lawbreaker after she took an 800-mile train journey after testing positive for COVID-19. In fact, one of the police forces investigating is the very same one that just said they won't be acting retrospectively over COVID incidents. How strange. Ferrier admitted to travelling to London from Glasgow despite having taken a test last Sunday after experiencing mild symptoms, but instead of following the isolation rules, she fucked off to Westminster. Even after the Met said they won't be wasting resources on Stanley Johnson, they have decided to put detectives from Scotland Yard onto the case to examine the circumstances of a trip. Absolute hypocrisy from the police right there. Ferrier has currently been suspended while the SNP investigate for themselves. Nicola Sturgeon branded Ferrier's actions as utterly indefensible and said it's hard to express just how angry I feel. After tweeting her apology, she was met with backlash, with users calling for her to be sacked. Ferrier tweeted, "I apologise unreservedly for breaching COVID-19 restrictions by travelling this week when I shouldn't have. There is no excuse for my actions. On Saturday afternoon, after experiencing mild symptoms, I requested a COVID-19 test, which I took that day. Feeling much better, I then travelled to London by train on Monday to attend Parliament as planned. This was wrong, and I am very sorry for my mistake. On Monday evening, I received a positive test result for COVID-19. I travelled home by train on Tuesday morning without seeking advice. This was also wrong, and I am sorry. I have been self-isolating at home ever since. I have used Test and Protect and notified the House of Commons authorities who have spoken with Public Health England. I've also notified the police of my actions. Despite feeling well, I should have self-isolated whilst waiting for my test results, and I deeply regret my actions. I take full responsibility and would urge everybody, and would urge everyone not to make the same mistakes that I have, and do all they can to help limit the spread of COVID-19. So what's the situation here? I'm confused as to why the Met won't do anything about Stanley Johnson or potentially Jezza, because they were made aware after the fact and won't deal with COVID lawbreakers retrospectively, adding that it wouldn't be appropriate or an effective use of resources, but yet put detectives on the case of Ferrier. Is it just me, or does that just sound completely hypocritical? The National Police Chief Council have said that they will only check on those supposed to be in quarantine twice before giving up and taking no further action. The rules surrounding coming back into the UK from a country not on the so-called safe list say that you must quarantine and that police will be checking on those who are supposed to be. However, after police were given a list and asked to check on 4,114 addresses, they found that 440 failed to answer the door. Obviously, with a huge amount of shopping centres and Asda stores they are called to in order to intimidate and threaten people without masks, they simply don't have the time to continually keep returning to addresses where someone has failed to answer. And so they've said that after the second attempt, they will give up without any further enforcement action being taken. Not exactly what you'd expect with such a virulent and deadly virus floating around, is it? However, it appears that the actual guidelines around enforcement action stated on the National Police Chief Council's website says that after the first visit, follow-ups are merely suggested. I refer to my previous comment. Not exactly what you'd expect with such a virulent and deadly virus floating around, is it? So far, 218 people are said to have been found in breach of the quarantine rules, but just 38 fines have been issued, as the remaining people have, according to the National Police Chief Council, been successfully encouraged to self-isolate. In 240 cases, returning passengers put the wrong address down on the locator form that is required for re-entry into the country, so no further enforcement action could be taken. Well, that all appears to be going swimmingly well, doesn't it, government? After reports over the last few months of how most crime rates had dropped in almost every police area, with police chiefs appearing to indicate it was due to their policing efforts, even though the country was on lockdown, a very strange and peculiar thing has now occurred. That's right, crime rates appear to be rising since the full lockdown ended. Who'd have guessed? Greater Manchester Police, for example, have said that crime in the area is returning to pre-coronavirus levels as police battle to enforce government rules to help stop the spread of COVID-19 in the region. The National Police Chief Council said that provisional statistics released by forces in England and Wales indicates that crime trends have returned close to pre-lockdown levels, following a 28% reduction at the height of lockdown. Now maybe, just maybe, the lower crime rates were not to do with the policing efforts after all. Just saying. Greater Manchester Police Assistant Chief Constable Nick Bailey said the data published by the National Police Chiefs Council reaffirms that demand is returning to the pre-COVID level and that the virus is continuing to place additional demand on forces. Since the end of July, Greater Manchester has been in a unique position as each of the 10 boroughs have been subject to varying local restrictions. These tighter regulations and the requirement to enforce these among a large population are understandably reflected in the data. So, blaming COVID for the rising crime now. Is that right? Wow, it was racist first, now it's a criminal. What next? He continued, Greater Manchester Police will continue to police COVID-19 by consent. Engaging with members of the public, explaining the restrictions and encouraging them to comply. Although enforcement is a last resort, continued breaches of the restrictions will not be tolerated. We all have a responsibility to comply to protect ourselves and our loved ones. Now, I'm just going to suggest that West Yorkshire Police, seeing as I know you're watching the channel, do me a favour and tell Greater Manchester Police to speak to their legal team and actually identify what's law and what's guidance, and maybe if they concentrate on that, they might free up a few additional police constables to deal with real crime instead of chasing people for face masks who, under the government's own information, their exemption doesn't need proving, and under the various legislations makes it unlawful to discriminate against. The Independent Office for Police Conduct is investigating a fatal collision which occurred on the 23rd of September in Salford, in which a vehicle being pursued by police crashed, killing both occupants. 35-year-old Patrick Connors and 29-year-old Thomas Sharp died when the Mercedes they were travelling in collided with two Volkswagen Passats, after the police alleged that they, in an unmarked vehicle, activated their lights and siren and pursued the vehicle for less than 60 seconds. IOPC Regional Director Amanda Rose said, the loss of these two men was a tragic incident and my thoughts are with their families and friends at this difficult time. When someone dies following contact with the police, it is mandatory for forces to refer the matter to the IOPC. We will be considering in-car footage, CCTV and witness statements to establish the circumstances of this incident and whether the local and national guidelines and procedures were followed. We will continue to keep the families of Mr Connors and Mr Sharp updated on our progress, as well as the force and the coroner. The spokesman said the two women in one of the cars, a taxi, were taken to hospital with serious injuries which are not thought to have been life-threatening. The driver of that car suffered minor injuries and the other driver was left uninjured. Inquests into the deaths were opened on Thursday. 5 Yorkshire welders have been jailed on the Isle of Man after arriving on the island, and instead of going straight into their accommodation, they stopped at a Tesco's allegedly to buy alcohol. Although I would imagine after arriving on the island they were likely buying other supplies too, like food. However, the reports just say alcohol. 5 men, aged between 18 and 62, arrived on the island by ferry from Hampshire, Lancs, on September 29th. The court heard that they were due to be doing 2 days maintenance work on the Manx Electric Railway for Hague Rail. Instead of going straight from the port to their accommodation, the group went to a Tesco store to buy alcohol, they were told. They were wearing masks, but aroused suspicion after engaging in conversation with a local, who heard one say, "I've just got off the boat." A member of Tesco staff then grasped them up to the police, even though they're wearing masks. Which begs the question, what's the bloody point? And the men were arrested by police later that night. All 5 defendants pleaded guilty to failing to comply with COVID-19 restrictions under the Emergency Powers Act and were each given 2 weeks in prison. No fine, just straight to jail. I mean, what about any extenuating circumstances? They were only there for a few days. Surely they needed to buy food and supplies, which they wouldn't have been able to get delivered in such a short time, and they were wearing magical masks to prevent others from catching anything. Right? The Isle of Man courts have apparently now sent 12 people to prison for breaking isolation. And I seriously find that incredibly harsh. Police here saying that they will check people once and the second check is suggested, not mandatory, to see if they're quarantining before giving up, with no further action. The guys were said to be wearing their masks and they can't be expected to go to the island and not have any supplies for days, even if they're going to be there longer than the 2 days maintenance work. Police seem to do what they can to protect those of society who have a penchant for abusing youngsters. We see this often. People find themselves in trouble for letting the wider community know if there is one of these sickos in the community, and considering children are less likely to be able to make the best decisions for themselves, it would of course be wise to let the adults, parents and guardians know if there is one in amongst their community. But yet there is still very little you can do to find out if there is a perv living next door. However, if you want to find out if your new fella is a bit handy, you can do that with very little effort and check to see if they have a history of domestic violence. Clare's Law is named after Claire Wood, who was murdered in Salford in 2009 by her then ex-boyfriend, who had a history of violence against women. Originally, people were able to make phone call applications for information. Cambridge Police, however, have now transferred that onto their website with an online application form for information, with immediate disclosures being made to individuals deemed at risk. Detective Inspector Sherry Nash said, as a police force, it is vital that we change with the time and ensure we are making applications such as this disclosure scheme as easy and accessible as possible. While the option to apply for information via 101 is still there, we recognise that we are living in an ever-increasing digital world, and many people would prefer to complete a simple online form and pick up a phone. Preventing and tackling domestic abuse is one of our main priorities, and the Clare's Law disclosure scheme helps us share crucial information with people who may be at risk of harm. We work closely with applicants and ensure appropriate safeguarding is in place in order to prevent them from becoming a victim of domestic abuse. It is hoped that the form not only helps free up time for our 101 call handlers, but also encourages more people to apply for information about their partner's criminal domestic abuse history, which really could help save a life. Now, I have to say, I have nothing against this. In fact, I think it's a great idea. However, the police are not allowed to give confidential information out to people. So this means that police cannot divulge the nature of any information they hold about somebody's new partner. This to me is an issue, because the police love filling in domestic violence forms, even for simple arguments. I faced this myself years ago after I split with my kid's mum. We had an argument, no violence whatsoever, but the police were called by me and a domestic violence form was filled in. This means that if I got with someone, the police could tell that person I have a domestic violence marker without being able to disclose what that is, and that is bad for people's potential relationships. I understand that the police are likely to look at the markers, and if it's just one or maybe two arguments without physical violence, they could well tell the person asking for disclosure that they're not at risk. But we know that's not how the police operate. I also find it horrifying that the police do not have a form online for members of the community to ask if their children are at risk from someone in the area. Adults, although we occasionally make the wrong decisions, make the right ones far more often than children do, and children need just as much protection from being at risk. It makes no sense that they are championing support for adults, but then protect those that we need support in order to protect our children against. An inquest into the death of a homeless man who died in London in 2016 ended on Thursday. West London's coroner court heard that 63-year-old Pericles Marlagardis, a Greek national who often slept rough, died from pre-existing medical conditions exacerbated by hypothermia after being removed from Uxbridge Police Station by Metropolitan Police Constable PC. After being removed from Uxbridge Police Station by Metropolitan Police Constable PC Bhupinder Kalsi and her colleague after he attended to pick up his dog, which had been placed in police kennels. Pericles was told his pet would be released the following day, but he hung around in the police station to keep warm before being removed at 12:40 a.m. Waiting outside the station all night to collect his pet in the morning, a check on his welfare was made over 5 hours later at 5:30 in the morning, where he was found to be unresponsive, and the London Ambulance Service was called. The temperature that night was around -1 degrees. He was taken to hospital, where he was pronounced dead at around 6:45 in the morning. A gross misconduct hearing in 2018 found that despite being aware he was outside the station in sub-zero temperatures, PC Kalsi failed to monitor Mr. Malagardi's condition for nearly 5 hours. She was also found to have been watching a film on DVD with a colleague throughout the night. The panel decided that PC Kalsi should be dismissed from the force with immediate effect because she had a case proven against her for gross incompetence. 4. Omitting information requested by the London Ambulance Service regarding actions taken to support Mr. Malagardi's and failed to follow instructions and training when dealing with unresponsive casualties as set out in the Emergency Life Support Treatment Training Manual, and failing to exercise reasonable care in her treatment and monitoring of Mr. Malagardi's following his ejection from the front office. The case was also proven against her for unsatisfactory performance for viewing a DVD whilst on duty following his ejection from the front office reception area. The colleague who was working with her that night was also found to have failed in their duty, but was ordered to take some emergency life support training rather than be dismissed. Independent Office for Police Conduct Regional Director Sal Nassim said this was a particularly tragic case, it turned out. Mr. Malagardi's was close to returning to home as money had been raised by local well-wishers to buy him a flight back to Greece. The lack of care towards him by the officer and the staff member was particularly cruel, and the failings of the officer to give adequate first aid was the major reason for her dismissal. Police officers have a duty of care for people they come into contact with, and Mr. Malagardi's was clearly failed by this officer. More than 4 years on, the impact of Pericles Malagardi's tragic death lives on. Our thoughts remain with those who knew him. 34-year-old Cleveland Bellend PC Robert Coffey is to face trial next year after pleading not guilty to 2 charges of corruption. What a surprise. No, seriously, how often is the word corruption used when reporting about police corruption? Teesside Crown Court heard the allegations relate to his failure to investigate a claim of assault between March 22nd and 25th, 2019 at Hartlepool. On March the 24th, 2019, it's alleged the defendant falsified an entry on a police incident log. His hearing this week was for the purposes of him entering his plea only, and he was released on unconditional bail for a date that appears yet to be set. 34-year-old Kevin Hathaway from Kidderminster, a former West Midlands plastic plod, attended Birmingham Magistrates Court on Friday, October the 2nd, for a hearing lasting just a few minutes. Due to the seriousness of the allegations, the appearance at Magistrates Court was simply to arrange a date for trial over the indictable offence. The charge states that between August 28th, 2018 and August 4th, 2019 at Birmingham in the county of West Midlands, whilst acting as a police officer, namely Kevin Hathaway, willfully and without reasonable excuse or justification, misconducted yourself in a way which amounted to an abuse of the public's trust in the office holder by forming and pursuing a sexual relationship with a victim of crime. Yet again, another pervy plod taking advantage of someone who's likely broken and vulnerable. Hathaway was granted unconditional bail. The investigation has been led by the IOPC, which carried out inquiries between August 2019 and March this year. Hathaway was charged in July, by which time he was no longer serving with the police. He will appear at Birmingham Crown Court later this month. A misconduct hearing for 6 Basingstoke police staff has been set to commence on Monday, the 12th of October. Retired Detective Inspector Tim Ierson, Detective Sergeant Oliver Lage, Detective Sergeant Gregory Wilcox, former PC Craig Bannerman, Trainee Detective Constable Andrew Ferguson and PC James Oldfield will have to answer for their allegations that they made comments of a discriminatory nature, including, and these aren't my words, as this simply just helps fuel division, homophobic, racist and sexist remarks whilst working at Basingstoke's North Hampshire Police Investigation Centre between March and April 2019. I will of course keep you abreast on any further information. An inquest into the death of 14-year-old Emily Green, who was found hanging in fields in Barnsley in November 2018, has heard that South Yorkshire Police received an allegation from Emily that she had been sexually assaulted prior to her death. The inquest found that there were failings both in the investigation as well as in the supervision and management of the investigation into the allegation made by Emily, and that these failures led to Emily feeling let down by police, and this directly impacted her mental health. It was also found that force failings were also highlighted where Emily was reported missing, with the handling of the call leading to a significant delay in the police response. Coroner David Erpeth said the evidence was that Emily took her own life with the intention of doing so. Prior to her death, Emily had made an allegation of sexual assault which was investigated by South Yorkshire Police. The evidence was that there were failings both in the investigation as well as the supervision and management of it. The evidence was that these failures led to Emily feeling let down by the police, and this directly impacted her mental health. When Emily was reported missing to South Yorkshire Police on November the 16th, 2018, there were failures in their handling of the call, leading to significant delay. Whilst it is not possible to say, had there not been significant failures by South Yorkshire Police, the outcome would definitely have been different. The sad fact is that Emily was deprived of the chance of it so being. South Yorkshire Police said, "Our thoughts and condolences remain focused on Emily's family today. We have listened to all of the information set out in the inquest and fully accept the findings of the coroner. The coroner has made a number of recommendations for the force based on the way which it operated when Emily reported a sexual offence in 2017. We will be providing a full update to the coroner detailing our current position and demonstrating the significant progress made since that time." Poor kid. And all South Yorkshire Police are going to do from it is learn from it. Greater Manchester Police just seem to be plagued with bad luck when it comes to their multi-million-pound computer system. The system that is claimed to have cost between 30 and 60 million pounds, the IOPS IT system, has been in the news a few times over this year. In February, it was reported how Greater Manchester Police were unable to submit its crime figures to the Home Office as a result of the system. There were concerns about the stability and the system and difficulties in searching the system, and some police staff were having to resort to paper records. In March, HMIC inspectors found that the system caused a delay in answering 999 calls, serious backlogs in dealing with abuse cases, and a loss of staff confidence and putting vulnerable people at risk. In July, it was reported that the system had problems, which saw instances of police having to use paper records again, due to a problem which was intermittently affecting some elements of the IOPS system. And now it transpires that thousands of victims of crime have had their details accidentally put online in a massive data breach. The names and details of victims of crime in Greater Manchester, including those of sexual abuse, have allegedly been accidentally put online. The data breach, which is said to have been very serious in both size and content, is under investigation by both Greater Manchester Police themselves and the Information Commissioner's Office. The sensitive information, which includes names and addresses of victims, witnesses and people reporting crime, was uploaded as part of a test, and that anyone could have been able to access records that included sex crime victims, witnesses and informants. Although Greater Manchester Police say that so far there is nothing to indicate the information has been externally accessed. Assistant Chief Constable Chris Sykes said, "We are aware of a possible data breach involving a limited data set of personal information which was used for testing purposes by our supplier. An internal investigation was immediately initiated and Greater Manchester Police proactively referred the matter to the Information Commissioner's Office. In line with the ICO requirements, Greater Manchester Police recorded the breach as soon as we became aware and gave a full description of the type of data involved. As well as informing the ICO, our other priority was to contact our suppliers to ensure the information was immediately taken down to make sure no further breaches were possible. Although any breach of data is a risk, I want to reassure the communities of Greater Manchester that the type of data available was limited personal data and did not include any detailed information on specific incidents or crimes. It also did not include any pictures, videos or addresses. This was in no way a breach of our live operational system and was a snapshot of data that was being used on a test system. At this time, there are currently no indicators to suggest that the data has been viewed by anyone outside of the authorised teams or that the data has been extracted. The investigation is currently ongoing with both the ICO and Greater Manchester Police, and further reports will be issued to the ICO as appropriate. As the investigation is still ongoing, we cannot provide any further information at this stage. When it comes to illegal immigrants, the problem seems to be people smuggling them into the country. So it makes a nice change to hear about someone trying to smuggle them out of the country. A 37-year-old Romanian national lorry driver was stopped at Dover, where 4 adult male migrants, 2 from Bangladesh, 1 Indian and 1 Egyptian, were caught trying to leave the country in the back of a trailer. The National Crime Agency stopped the vehicle at around 1:30 p.m. on the 1st of October after it was booked across the channel by boat to Calais. Investigators believe the migrants had been in the UK illegally and are now being questioned by immigration authorities. Wouldn't it have been far more simple to just let them go home? Andy Noyles, National Crime Agency branch commander, said criminal groups involved in people smuggling do not care about the safety or well-being of those they transport. They just see them as a commodity to be profited from. You mean a bit like the people that are sticking them up in hotels? Aren't they doing the same thing? We are determined to do all we can to disrupt their activities, he said. In this case, 4 individuals have been prevented from making what was undoubtedly a dangerous journey and prevented from leaving the country. Well done. Our investigation continues, he said. Now, I'm sure it won't be long before those coming here for a piece of the United Kingdom dream realise what a state this country is in and simply either don't want to bother or want to bugger off back home again anyway. To be honest, I feel like being smuggled out of the bloody country myself right now. Very big thank you to channel supporters, one and all, especially our channel Patreon supporters. Your support truly does help. And that's all I have for you today. Please like, share, comment and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts, as I know many of you will. And until next time, stay safe, look after each other, from the police and other officials, and from Sergeant Big Ted, PC Little Ted, and this one still yet to name. Have a great weekend.
Good night, all.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you like the content and you'd like to help support the channel, you can do so. In the description of every video there are some links to ways that you're able to help support the channel so I can continue putting out content. If you're unable to help us in that way, hit that subscribe button up the top there. If you haven't already, become a subscriber. That is support enough. Share the videos, comment, like, it all helps. If you're looking for something else to watch, up top there is my latest video. Down the bottom there is a video that YouTube recommends for you.